Welcome to the smartest people in the room. We are glad you are here, and just by showing up, you're already demonstrating your very own smarts. Today, I am pleased to break with my normal format and conduct this interview myself. Hopefully, that tells you how much I admire and respect this guest. Trust me, he is worth the extra TLC. And as usual, I promise you will leave smarter and more enlightened than you arrived. Before we get started, please let me take care of some business. First, to the audience, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat window. The reason we do these webinars is twofold. First, we want to showcase really smart people and the amazing work they do day to day in the music industry. But the second reason is a bit more nuanced. Many of you know that I am a music industry headhunter. I run the music practice at Turnkey ZRG, and I place music executives in roles throughout the industry. So by definition and function, I help people connect with companies. In this series, my goal is to help you make more connections, and I invite you to take full advantage of that opportunity. Specifically, I invite you to engage with both of us, as well as the attendees in the chat of the Zoom. Please introduce yourselves, share your LinkedIn profile, say hello to your friends, and make some new ones. And ask questions of both Zach and I. We will address as many of those as possible during the interview. And please make sure your chat is set to address everyone, not just the host and speakers. I want to thank our program sponsors, for without their support, we could not keep this series free. Special thanks to First Horizon Bank, Turnkey ZRG, the Tennessee Entertainment Commission, MedJet, Tennessee Brew Works, and Better Than Booze. So let's get down to business. I am so excited to present one of the most impressive young music executives I've ever met, Zach Kuhn. Zach is an entertainment entrepreneur and media personality, always at the intersection of music and culture through his various ventures. Most notably, he is founder and CEO of the Nashville Briefing, a newsletter and media company that covers the confluence of country music and the global music business. In just a few years' time, the trusted newsletter has amassed thousands of subscribers that span all walks of the industry. He also hosts the Zach Kuhn Show, a popular podcast where he interviews leaders and legends and icons in the world of entertainment. Some guests have included Brad Paisley, Bobby Bones, Seth Godin, Billy Gibbons, and many others. Zach is a graduate of Berklee College of Music, where he studied guitar performance. Despite his various ventures, he still finds time to tour with major label artists and has performed in the pit of Wicked on Broadway. He's an advisor for a variety of music-related companies and organizations, including former Berklee president Roger Brown's Salt Lick Incubator. He was the music consultant for the Apple TV Hello Sunshine show called My Kind of Country. It is my pleasure to welcome this mogul in the making to our platform today. Zach, it is such a pleasure to have you here, brother.
Tom, I'm thrilled to be here. And this is exciting because most of the time I do my podcast, I do about a podcast a week, which is a similar format, but that's pre-recorded. So that ends, and what happens is the publicist calls me and they go, "That was great, but can we take this out? Can we take that out? Can we move this around?" And sometimes if I'm feeling nice, I say yes. And sometimes I'll say, "No, that was the point of the interview. That's the best part." But it's just this and we're done. We're live and whatever happens, happens. So that's part of the excitement about it.
Swinging without a net, buddy.
100%.
The honest truth is I'm asked all the time about my podcast, about your podcast. I'm like, no. This is not a podcast because, as you just correctly said, podcasts are a shit ton of work. And I don't have the ability to do all that work. So this is live TV. What you say shall be recorded for posterity and blown out on the internet. And I look forward to some viral content coming from this conversation.
That's the goal here, is that we get a little bit of viral content. And you've had the best guests on this series. I've watched a ton of these, but I remember there was one that stood out. Bob Lefsetz and Mark Geiger had been on. I mean, you've had the biggest people, but that interview I remember watching, and it was just so fun and exciting. And there's always exciting things that get said here. So hopefully we can bring a little excitement as well and not disappoint.
Well, that particular event is probably the event that put this on the map bigger than anything. That event took place in June of 20, when COVID was really starting to flare up big time. And you may remember how the music industry was deluding itself at that moment, thinking, oh, well, we're going to be dark for a few weeks, maybe a few months. And about 5 minutes into that episode, Geiger fired the shot heard round the world. He said, we're not going to have any live music until the end of 21. And I was like, holy shit, did he really just say the end of 21? And within minutes, people were blowing me up all around the country and all around the industry going, did Geiger really just say that on your show? I was like, yes. So thank you for noticing, man. But we are here to talk about you, not about me. First
No, it's
off,
gonna be a little bit of both, of back and forth, Tom. That was the only thing. That was the reason I agreed to this, was for a little back and forth. But I'll
well,
let you kick it off.
I lied. This is all about you. Seriously, the thing that I find so intriguing about you is how you just conduct yourself. You're 28 years old. You carry yourself like you're 48. You know, tell me a little bit about you. How did you become so wise beyond your years?
I don't know if that's the case, but that's very nice of you to say. I mean, really, I just grew up being obsessed with music, listening to so much music, playing a variety of instruments. You know, as I was growing up, started playing piano when I was in kindergarten and started to learn how to read music and grew up playing instruments. And I feel like I'm the last generation, easily the last generation that grew up with the ability to still go to record stores, which is weird because my friends and I would take the train into New York City and we'd go to Bleecker Street Records and all these record stores in Brooklyn. And we would talk to the clerks who would make recommendations for us. And they would turn us on to so much music that I think that my knowledge of music is so wide, ranging from weird pop music from the 50s, going through heavy metal to classic rock, through, especially when I was growing up in the early 2000s, there were all these great New York rock bands that, you know, Meet Me in the Bathroom, that book covers so well. And that was the scene that I was really interested in as well, along with hip hop and everything else. So I just think I grew up in a time where it was fun to go music shopping and really discover music. That was like a hobby, where today I don't know if it's the same, not to already date myself or whatever, but grew up going into the city, going to record stores, you know, working in a recording studio, just always being around that, seeing concerts too, and the whole thing. Probably like many people tuning in have a similar experience. So that was kind of the start of it, I would say.
So, did you grow up in a musical household? Were your parents musicians and into music as much as you were?
Not really. And sometimes I say this to them and they actually will say, what are you talking about? We're a very musical household. And I'll say, not really. You know, they would always kind of play music, but I always say that my dad will listen to musical wallpaper. He doesn't care what's being played as long as there's something playing. Where I'm the opposite. Like I'll be scrolling through stations on Sirius XM until I find something that I want to listen to, where he doesn't care. He'll just put anything on. And you know, a lot of my family is very into musical theater. We grew up in New York. We saw a lot of theater. And my mom plays a little bit of piano, but she would play pretty rarely when I was growing up. So I mean, there was music playing in the house, but I was really the only one. I have two siblings. I was the only one who wanted to go to concerts. I was the only one who was actively collecting CDs and vinyl and was actively playing my music, and you know, to my siblings' detriment, because they would always yell at me to shut up when they were trying to study or whatever. So I was kind of the only one.
When did you pick up an instrument? When did you start taking lessons?
I started taking lessons when I was in kindergarten. I started taking piano lessons because I asked for piano lessons.
Kindergarten?
Kindergarten, but I started playing piano, very rudimentary piano. And then I played violin for a year in third grade because it was offered. And then they, in fourth grade, we could pick between horn instruments. And I said, I'll take a sax. So I ditched violin, played saxophone. And then sixth grade, I played guitar. I picked up a guitar. That was kind of game over for me. Once I picked up a guitar, I stopped playing everything else, essentially.
Piano, you said piano, sax, something else, and
I played
guitar.
violin in third grade,
Violin.
but I played violin at a third grade level for 1 year. I mean, I wouldn't even know what to do with a violin if you hand me a violin. But I think it all has a progression, because the commonality is you're just around music, you're seeing rhythms, you're playing rhythms, you're reading notation, and that transfers instrument to instrument. So I think it helps to, if you're going to play, it definitely helps to start young, but guitar was definitely when I first picked up a guitar. That was when and really it was because the music that I was listening to at the time was so guitar centric And it's so easy to love rock stars because they're up front and they're playing guitar and there's big crowds. And you don't see that with a violin as frequently. Apologize to all our violin players on this call. But violin's not cool. Saxophone's cool, but guitar, that was it. I want to be a guitar player.
So you're in middle school playing shredding on a guitar. Chicks in sixth grade dig guitar players too, right?
No, this is the myth. Is every guitar player picks up guitar because they want to meet chicks. And I don't think I've ever met a chick for playing guitar. It's never worked in my favor. They run away from you from playing guitar. You're the guy at the party playing Wonderwall. Nobody wants to be around you. But you pick it up or to get the chicks, but then you fall in love with the instrument and then you don't even care at that point. Then you're avoiding them. I remember honestly early dances and social things that happened in high school. I would miss all of them because I would stay in my basement playing guitar. That was more fun to me than going to these events. So eventually, it has the opposite effect where it becomes a repellent, but maybe it'll come around in the next life. We'll see.
So in high school, were you in jazz band and other things? And were you a theater kid?
I performed in the Pizza Theater in high school. We did production of Rent. And I always played, I would help host the talent shows and I would play in those. And then I was in the jazz band. We actually had an amazing program where we had a guitar lab in our high school that had probably 20 guitars hanging on the wall and MIDI keyboards. And in, study hall or recess or, lunch, I would go in there and there was a teacher there who would take these guitars down and really show us how to play. And it was just a crazy thing that my public school had this, but it was literally a guitar lab with amps and everything, and that was hugely influential. And one of those teachers really got me into country music, turned me on to Brad Paisley, who became a big, musical hero. And I was able to interview him on my podcast. But that was really a crazy thing to have looking back. That every day I would go like anytime I could. Sometimes I'd go to the bathroom in the middle of a math class and pop into this room for 10 minutes and just play guitar and then sneak out and go back into the class like nothing happened. But any chance I could, I was trying to get my hands on a guitar.
So who was your Mr. Holland? Who was that teacher that was so influential?
It was probably this guy named his name was John Carini. He was a local teacher that no one's ever heard of, but I'm still in touch with him. And he's to this day, I think he's a phenomenal guitar player. He's an incredible musician. But he taught me a lot. And then it's funny too, because I would take the train into the city when I was a little bit older in high school, and I would take lessons from Jim Campolongo, who some people might not know, but in the guitar world, he's a really famous guitar player. And I begged him to give me lessons. And I would go out to his apartment in Brooklyn, and he'd be smoking a cigarette the whole time. And he would give me these long, long, long lessons. And then I used to take lessons from Arlen Roth, who in the guitar community is Mr. Guitar Teacher. In the 80s and 90s, he filmed these long videos of guitar instruction that are really famous in the guitar world. And I emailed him and I just said, and I begged him for lessons too. And he would give me lessons. And then when I was in school in Boston, there's another teacher, Duke Levine, that many guitarists say is the best guitar player in the world. And if you're listening to this, and if you have any interest in instrumental guitar music, Duke Levine is probably one of the best people who's ever done it. He plays with a ton of people, but he's just a guy in Boston. And I begged him for lessons too. And I'd go out to his house and take lessons with him. So I've always tried to track down the best people that I could find to teach me. But that was basically it. So there's a couple in there that had a big influence. But now it's funny because no one thinks of me as a guitar player, but that's kind of how I started originally. That's sort of how I got into this whole thing, was playing guitar.
And so you leave high school, you go to Berkeley, best musical school there is, right? Huh?
Yeah, I mean, I think so, but I'm biased. But of course, yeah. Enough of these kids at Belmont in Nashville, that's a dead end. No. Belmont's an amazing school, let's be honest.
Well, Belmont, I would submit to you, Belmont's music business program is far superior to Berkeley's, but for instrumentation and performance, it's hard to beat Berkeley.
I mean, it's such a melting pot, and in Nashville too, you have the benefit of you're local in Nashville. So all the kids who go to Belmont have such a leg up because they know the scene, they get connected into the industry, the whole thing. But the performance opportunities at Berkeley are definitely pretty incredible. I mean, the teachers there. I mean, I don't know if the teachers there are incredible. and they're all kind of working professionals. So they've like the resume of like my guitar teacher was on tour with Roseanne Cash and Peter Wolf of the Jay Giles band. And he would tour with them on the weekends and he'd play with, he'd come to Berkeley and teach during the week. And we had people who played, I mean, I had teachers who were playing Madison Square Garden one week and, in the classroom the next week. So it was definitely, I mean, yeah, it's definitely a special place.
So you decided relatively young that music was your calling, that you're going to do this for a living, right?
Tom, between you and me, it's just you and me here, right? It was the only thing I could do. I had horrible grades in high school. Okay. Everybody thought I was going to fail high school. People didn't even think I was going to graduate. Like that was a real worry of the people around me was that I wasn't going to graduate high school because my grades were so horrible. This was the only thing I could do, Tom, was go into the music business. It was the only thing I was interested in. Pretty much remains that way today. And at Berkeley, I ended up getting, basically perfect grades, with the exception of a statistics class that really screwed my whole GPA. But I don't want to talk about that. Let's not bring that up. But short of that, it was, that was the only thing I could do. And I feel like I knew that pretty early, that it was basically, I just had to go into the music business.
Well, did you think you were going to go into the music business as a performer or as a music mogul?
Originally, very early on, I thought I was going to be a performer. And then I thought I was going to be an artist manager, which is really because of, I think, and this is going to sound crazy. This might be the clickbait that gets pulled from this, but I wanted to go be a manager because of Scooter Braun, who's kind of like the Van Halen of managers. The way Van Halen inspired everyone to play guitar. Scooter Braun was in the Justin Bieber music video talking about, oh, I'm Justin Bieber's manager. And he had this suaveness to him. And he could have been an agent, he could have been an A&R, he could have been anything, but there was something about him being self-made. He started out in the industry super young. He built his empire from the ground up. I talked to a lot of young people in the music business who say that they were inspired to go into the music business because they saw what Scooter Braun was doing. And now I don't know if that has the same weight. I like to think it does. But I thought pretty early into my time at college that there's no way being a guitar player is going to, is going to do that much. There's a million guitar players. I thought I was going to be a manager, I think mostly inspired by Scooter Braun. I was also taking a course, Music Business 101, with George Howard, who, if you don't know George Howard, he's one of the great minds in the music business. He's one of the co-founders of TuneCore.
And an alumnus of this program.
Is he? And you had him and Ralph on. One of the smartest guys in the world. It is impossible, and he's got a great podcast too that I think was a limited thing. But if you take away nothing from this conversation, go track down George Howard and just look into his work. But it is impossible to sit in his class and to not be inspired by the music business. And I sat in Music Business 101. I took him for several other classes too. I took him for ethics. I took him for the entrepreneurial mindset, tons and tons of classes. And the models that I took away from his class, I still use today. But it is impossible to sit in a classroom with George Howard and to not get excited about the music industry. So I think he had a big impact to say, maybe I'll go that route. And technically, I actually did a dual major at Berkeley. I studied music business and guitar performance, and I graduated with both degrees. So I think both. So, I've always kind of had a hard time picking between the two, I guess, is the answer.
So you wanted to go into management. Did you have any interesting internships that helped propel that chapter of your career?
He's throwing me these softballs to answer I had some crazy internships that I look back on and they were just wild, and there'll probably be a chapter in my memoir if I ever write one about the internships. But my first internship was actually at Razor and Tie, and I was working for in the Kids Bop department, if you know what that is. But
Vic Soraya?
Yes, yeah. So I was doing Kids Bop. That led to an internship at Vector Management here in Nashville. I was working with Ken Levitan and his assistant. I was working across that roster, and I almost smashed his car, which is a pretty funny story. Luckily I didn't, but it was really close. That might be for another webinar. And kind of connections I made through that led to an internship where I was interning for Irving Azoff in LA. I was his personal intern for a little bit, and he had, he's got his 3 assistant desks right here, and then my desk was right here, and I was helping them with pretty much everything that nobody else wanted to do in that office would basically be my responsibility. But I would oversee a lot of phone calls. I'd be a fly on the wall for a lot of phone calls. I'd answer the phone, and it'd be Joe Walsh or it'd be Frankie Valli, or I'd validate parking for Harry Styles, or Gwen Stefani would be in the office or something, someone, every day there was always something exciting going on. And I did that for a little bit, and that was definitely impactful for sure.
So I see a pattern forming here. How old are you at that point working for Irving?
Under 20, maybe 19, or maybe,
Snot-nosed punk.
yeah.
Snot-nosed punk working for Ken Levitan, one of the biggest names in the business, and then Irving Azoff, clearly on the Mount Rushmore of the industry at 19 years old. Really? So, folks, when I told you that this is a mogul in the making when I introduced him a minute ago, do you now believe what I'm saying? This young man is way beyond his years. Incredible, Zach.
We're trying. The best story though, which this is just a great story that, will probably also be in the memoir if I ever write one,
Bring
is
it.
it's probably day 2 of working in this office, okay? And to get a level, of the kinds of activities I was doing, there was a frozen yogurt machine. I think it's probably still there in the office where it's just in the kitchen and you can go and get frozen yogurt, pull the thing down, frozen yogurt comes out. And one of the things I had to do was clean the yogurt machine on every other day. And you have to take it apart. And if you've ever put a yogurt machine together, it literally requires lube, where you have to you have a bottle that says lube, and you have to lube the yogurt machine so the parts spin properly within the yogurt machine. So you take it out, you rub lube all over it, you put it back together, it spins, yogurt comes out. So I'm doing this on probably day 2. And Irving walks in, and I'd been on a phone call with him, but I'd never met him in person. So he has no idea what I look like. And he looks at me and he says, "Who are you?" And I go, "Irving, I'm the new intern." And he goes, "It's great to meet you." And he puts his hand out to shake my hand. And I say to him verbatim, "Irving, I can't shake your hand. My hand's covered in lube." And he gives me a weird look because he has no idea what goes into managing the yogurt machine. That's so below his pay grade. So he gives me a weird look and he kind of taps me on the shoulder and he's like, "It's great to meet you. If you need anything, let me know." And he goes into the soda machine, grabs a Coke, exits the kitchen. One of the assistants is in the kitchen, sees this whole thing. He is dying laughing. He goes around the entire office, starts telling this story to everyone. My nickname for my entire run there was Luber, affectionately. And they still call me that. If I'm still in that office, or if I see anyone, they still refer to me as Luber. I'm convinced there's people who don't even know my name in that office. They just know me as Luber.
I'm convinced there's a lot of people in Nashville going forward that are going to start calling you Luber.
I might be bringing it back. Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Luber.
Yes.
Love it. Smartest people in the room, gold right there. So let's talk a little bit about Nashville. You come to Nashville, what, 2017, 18, 19? When was that?
18.
18. Why Nashville?
Nashville's an incredible whoa, we got some comments here. My brother Rob is on Jim Campbell Records from Jordan Berger. Jordan, that's awesome. I didn't know that. Nashville was I mean, it's a pretty crazy place, especially as someone who loves guitar. It is such a centric guitar town where so many of the best guitar players are here. So that was really exciting. I didn't love living in LA. I hate driving. I grew up in New York. I'm a horrible driver, Tom. If you see me on the road, you gotta get out of the way because I just like smashed a car recently. I didn't smash it. I was driving next to it and I thought I cleared it and I just scraped the entire side of the car. And that reaffirmed my belief that I don't know how to drive a car. So LA is horrible for me. And Nashville just seemed, and I'd spent a summer in Nashville and I felt like I'd made more friends in 3 months of living in Nashville than I had, in a year of living in LA. I just felt a connection to it. I still feel a connection to it. I mean, it's Music City. And it just seemed like the place. I had so many friends here. I had a ton of friends move here after college, and just seemed like I'd be missing out if I wasn't in Nashville. So that brought me down.
The way I describe Nashville to the uninitiated is Nashville is the music equivalent of the Olympic Village. In other words, the world's best of anything related to this sport come here. The best writers, the best players, the best producers. This is the Olympic Village of music.
And they have a lot of sex too in Nashville, I guess. No, I'm kidding.
Well, one of the things that you did when you got here is you reached out to me. And I remember having breakfast with you back then, and I was really impressed with how you went about that. And what were you, 23 then, 22, whatever?
Probably 22, yeah.
So was I the only person you reached out to?
Tom, I hate to say it because I probably made it seem so personal, but I was reaching out to everyone, but you were special, Tom. I really wanted to meet with you. But well, what I did is I got to town and I knew a handful of people, but I didn't know a ton of people. And I ordered the Music Row directory, which you can still get, and it has 500 of the most important, people who know in Nashville. It's got Scott Borchetta's email and it had Mike Dungan's email and like everyone's email. And I would sit on my couch in my apartment and I would just start emailing everyone. Literally, I went through the entire book, emailing everyone, and I would craft the most specific emails. So if I was to email you, Tom, I would spend 20 minutes researching who you were. I'd come up with something so specific to email you. And I had a Google Doc where I had everyone's name and I was going through it. And I was keeping track of how, like, when I'd follow, like, it was so insane because I don't have the energy to do this today at all. But back then, it was like I was emailing everyone and it worked so well, which is one of the testaments, I think, to Nashville is that people will do this in Nashville. Within a couple months, I had meetings with John Esposito, who was running Warner at the time, who graciously brought me into his office. Mike Dungan sat with me for an hour from a cold freaking email. I mean, the list is insane. So many people like RJ Romeo is one of my really good friends who I met from a cold email. And I'm sure I did the same with you. And and it's funny how I feel like that set me up for even what I'm doing now, because there's still relationships that I call on now where that I created through that process. And I remember being with a group of people during CMA Fest, when I first moved here, and we're downtown, and there's John Esposito, and it's me and a whole bunch of kids who just moved to town at the same time. And John looks at me and he goes, "Zach, how are you, man? You're looking great." He goes, "Are you losing weight?" He goes, "It's great to see you." It's literally what he said. I said, "Great to see you too, Espo," and he walked away. And these like four or five other kids who were with me were like, "Who the fuck are you? Like, what just happened?" And it was like, look, you too could have cold emailed, okay? That was really the secret. But that was definitely how I got that was definitely how I got my first foot in the door, I would say.
Well, once again, I tip my hat to you for being wise beyond your years. You sweat the details. You took the time to study these people, and then you had the balls to reach out to them in hopes of landing a meeting. And then once you get in the room with those people, you don't embarrass yourself. And so kudos to you. And your success is no accident. This is a
I might
fantastic
have there were
story.
definitely some embarrassing moments too. I remember having a meeting with this is a great story too, which I remember having a meeting with someone at Big Machine who was really senior. And I was having a meeting with them and they were talking about something. This was cold email. I'm in the Big Machine building. I'm in an office talking to someone at Big Machine. And they had said something about Taylor. They were like, "Yeah, and Taylor's doing this or Taylor's doing that." And I try to make the worst joke ever where I say, "Now, when you say Taylor, you mean Taylor?" And they go, "Swift." And I go, "No, no, I know. I'm kidding. Like it was a bad joke." And they go, before you go into a building, you should really look into like who's on the roster, who works there." And I was like, "No, no, no. It was just a joke." And they took it so seriously. So that was an embarrassing moment looking back. And there were others too that I won't share here.
If that's the worst one of all time, you're going to be fine.
Okay.
So Derek Crownover asked a question here that is interesting. By the way, Derek's one of the best Music Row attorneys, actually not just Music Row, I'd say global music attorneys.
He's my
And
go-to when I need anything.
I can't afford him. How do you afford him? Jesus. Um, Seriously, he wants to know about leaning into journalism. So you come to town, you think you're going to be an artist manager or shredder, but yet you then lean into journalism. And what drove that decision?
It was a lot of things. And I'm very dyslexic. And, there's a lot of people early in my life that when they found out that I've been doing this or have been having success with it, they're like, "I never would have thought you would have gone into words or writing or anything like that." This thing started really with I was at ACM Awards in Vegas and I was at a lunch with a whole bunch of publicists. And they said to me, wouldn't, we really wish that there was like another outlet that we could interact with that would be really hip, really cutting edge, really cool. And they sort of described a little bit what the National Briefing became. And I had this idea that was like, I could do that. I was quickly finding out that artist management was really not what I wanted to do. It wasn't that interesting to me. And I really wanted to build a brand and something that I owned. That was kind of the thing with artist management is your whole career is revolving around building someone else's brand, someone else's career. You're at their beck and call. And I want to build something that I could own and really, have a stake in. So they're describing this thing, and I just had this thought I could do this. So I went and I told a couple of my friends that I was with that I think I'm going to start this music industry publication. And they literally said to me, they said, don't do that. And they said, don't even tell people that you're going to do that because you're probably not going to do it. And then it's going to be embarrassing, like when you don't follow through. That's literally what they said to me. So I said, no, I'm going to do this. So it started out as an email that I would send out to two people, my brother, because I thought my brother would be a safe space, and a reporter journalist friend that I had at the time, whose name was Krista Smith, still a really good friend of mine. And at the time, she was at Vanity Fair running Hollywood for them. So super influential, really big reporter, journalist. And I thought, I'll send this to two people. I would wake up in the morning at 6 a.m. I'd compile all the information, everything that I thought was interesting. I'd send it out. I developed it for probably a couple weeks just with those two people on the email. Then I said, okay, I'm going to send this to 5 more people. I picked my 5 closest friends. Roxy King, who's a publisher at Universal. She was one of the first people. My friend Alex Goodman, who works at Riser House, a label in town, like all these people. It was like 5 people. I said, can you just read this? So now there were 7 people on the fucking list. Eventually got to the point where people would say, this is starting to get good. And other people in my office, like I'm forwarding this to people in my office. Can they get on the list? So I said, yeah, I'll add their email. Eventually it started to topple over where enough people were saying, how do I get on this? How do I get on this? So I built a website because at that point I was adding everyone's emails manually. So I built a website, and it was basically a one sheet page website that had a sign in where you could go in and sign in. So people started to subscribe. The next thing I did was I got connected to David Ross, who's the founder of Music Row. And I actually didn't reach out to him. Boss Ross, I didn't really know who he was to even reach out to him. But somebody said to me, if you're going to do this, you need to talk to David Ross. So they put me on email with him, and I got lunch with him. And he's been the best mentor ever because nobody is better to do this than him. When I fuck up so bad, I call Boss Ross. When things are going amazing, I call Boss Ross. When things are just going like this, I talk to Boss Ross. I mean, he's the best. So I talked to him, and he said, you know what I did with Music Row in the early days was I bought mugs, and I walked up and down Music Row, and I just gave people mugs. And that created some brand awareness, but also got people to subscribe. So I said, genius, I'm going to do that. So I bought probably 1,000 mugs that said National Briefing on them. They were yellow. My parents have half of them because, they're the only mugs that are in my childhood home. It's ridiculous. So, and I would go up and down Music Row, giving people sets of these mugs. They still exist in a ton of these offices. And then the other thing that was hilarious was I would do these meetings and I would bring people mugs in the meeting. So I'd meet with like Tom True. I may have brought you a mug, and
I just want a hat.
We'll get you a hat. My first meeting, I was like, here's a mug. And that got people to subscribe as well. So that got my next, 1,000, 2,000 subscribers on the list. And from there, it was off to the races. And then now we're in print. We're working on our next print issue right now. And, it's all kind of stemmed from that. We've built a team. We have a sales person, and we have someone who's our managing editor who oversees the content. We have freelance writers. And it's crazy because we work with some of the best writers, I think, in the industry. Like the writers who write for National Briefing, they write for Billboard, they write for Rolling Stone, they write for Variety, they write for Forbes. We had a writer who was writing for us all the time. She was unbelievable. Her name is Hannah Daly, and Billboard poached her, and we couldn't compete with Billboard, but they gave her a full-time job and salary, and now she's crushing it over at Billboard. So it's like we've just had an amazing job. I feel like it's been cool that somehow, for whatever reason, we've created enough excitement that some of the best people who do this are excited to write for us. And they when I call people, I say, I've got another story. Can we do this? They jump at the opportunity to do it, which is super cool and exciting. And we're in a fun place with it right now.
So does it come out every day, the briefing?
So the newsletter comes out 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. You can subscribe to it too. You can go to nationalbriefing.com. You can put your email in, it's free. Comes out 3 times a week, and our print issues we just started doing the print issues right now. We're doing them quarterly. And you can go to our website, nationalbriefing.com. Still, you can go click the merch tab. You can order our print issues. They're starting to get old, but I think a lot of the content in there is still really, really, really good. A lot of it's pretty evergreen, I would say, and just really interesting. And we're working on our next print issue right now. Our cover artist for the next issue, I probably won't reveal it here, but he's literally on the top of the Billboard charts right now, and he's going to be our cover artist for the next issue. You might be able to guess who it is, and we're having some conversations for some insane people. In the last print issue, we had a whole profile that we did interviewing Keith Urban. We had Dasha on the print issue right when Austin was blowing up, so that was really exciting. We've got one right here. We have Dasha on the cover. Keith Urban, the first print issue, we did a whole interview with Bobby Bones. It was one of the first print interviews he did in over 5 years. And he was really excited to do it. So we get amazing people in print, which is crazy. We almost have more excitement around the print than we do around the digital stuff. Like people that I've never been able to work with on the digital side for whatever reason, when I reach out to their teams to be in print, they jump at the opportunity. So it's very cool.
So let's talk a little bit about the podcast.
Yeah.
Who dared you to do that?
And Tom, I'm about to flip this back to you, okay? But the podcast was, I'd always loved podcasts, and the podcast really started early in the pandemic because there was so much isolation, obviously, and I wasn't meeting people, and I thought I could use the podcast to meet other people. By the way, Steve O'Brien just said, great interview. Steve O'Brien, if I'm not mistaken, was the person who introduced me to David Ross. So I have Steve O'Brien to thank for that. I'm pretty sure that was you, Steve. So interview podcast. So I want to start this podcast. And the first person I reached out to do it was David Ross. And by the way, the number one thing I get asked all the time is, how do you start a podcast? And I go, it's so easy. The way you start a podcast is you just have to start a podcast. And that's it. In my case, what I did, which I always think is great advice, is I hired a designer to make my podcast artwork. I paid them $150. This was before I had a guest, before I had anything. And then that artwork was staring on my face. I printed it out and I put it in my bathroom, and it was just staring at me. And I go, I just paid $150 for this. If I don't use this artwork, it's going to be a waste. It's going to be ridiculous. So finally, I emailed David Ross. I say, would you do that? I'm trying to start a podcast. I hop on the phone with David. He graciously agrees. We do the interview. My next interview, I think, was Joe Galante, because I had this thought. Joe Galante, at the time he was retired, he still is incredibly influential, but I had this thought that maybe I could get a little snippet of Joe Galante's time to do this. So I emailed Joe. He graciously, agreed to come on the podcast. We had a great episode. And once I had Joe, it was like everyone I emailed was like, oh, Joe Galante did your podcast, I'll do your podcast. Like, I don't even know who you are, but you have the seal of approval from Joe. I'll come on the show. So that was kind of off to the races. And it's crazy. I've had Billy Gibbons on the podcast, and this is one of my favorite memories ever, because one of my best friends is a massive ZZ Top fan. And I booked the interview with Billy, and I called him up and I said, I just booked an interview with Billy, and he was dying. I said, you're going to do it with me. And I brought him into the interview, and we interviewed Billy Gibbons together, which is like I told this story at his wedding because it was like the greatest moment ever. And we asked Billy who makes his jackets, because who doesn't want to know who makes Billy Gibbons clothing? And this is really interesting. He said, everyone talks about Manuel, who makes the Manuel suits, and Nudie Cohen, who is Manuel's mentor. And nobody talks about Jaime in West Hollywood, who has a little shop, and he makes all the jackets. And Jaime was the seamstress teenager kid in Nudie Cohen's shop when Nudie was making all the jackets. And he makes everything for Billy Gibbons. I just saw Marty Stewart was there getting jackets made. So Billy goes, let's call Jaime right now. So Billy picks up the phone, calls Jaime. Jaime picks up. He goes, Senor Gibbons. He has a strong accent. And he goes, I've got 2 friends here that I'm sitting with who are about to call you, and they're going to order some jackets. Okay. Put it on my tab. And my friend and I, they were like, what the fuck? Like, this is insane, because my first concert was ZZ Top at Jones Beach in New York. And now I'm sitting with Billy Gibbons, who's ordering us jackets, and I have the jacket over there. It was crazy. So that's been an insane memory from the podcast. And The thing about the podcast is it just has to be consistent. And every week it's like we're not interviewing superstars every week, but just the momentum of it people get really excited about it, and you go through your life and all of a sudden you meet someone who knows someone, they go, wait, you have a podcast. I could get you in with Billy Gibbons. And that's kind of how it happened. Like I met his manager and became friendly with him. And we started to really like each other. And he said, you should interview Billy Gibbons. I would just like to see the two of you together. And that was kind of it basically.
I love that. So is it a video podcast or just audio?
It started out as audio, which is always the other thing I say is people freak out when they start a podcast and they think it's got to be something that's like, just start. If it has to be a phone, I was recording phone calls. That was basically how it started. And those early episodes, the quality is horrible. And then as the show progressed, we moved to video, and now pretty much everything we do is video. And you can go, it's on YouTube. If you just type my name into YouTube, the show instantly comes up. All the video episodes, or if you just type my name wherever you listen to podcasts, the Zach Kuhn Show or Zach Kuhn, everything comes up there. So it's super easy to find.
Crazy. How many have you done? How many do you have in the can?
We've done 150 of them interviews. We did our 100th episode. Did I tell you about the Bobby Bones when we had Bobby Bones, how we got Bobby Bones on the 100th
No, I
episode?
want to hear that.
So Bobby Bones he has a podcast, the Bobby Cast, and I'm a huge Bobby Bones fan. On the 100th episode of his podcast, he said, you're not a real podcast until you hit 100 episodes. This is our 100th episode. Now we're a real podcast. So I kind of filed that away in the back of my head. I said, I'm going to make a huge campaign for when I reach the 100th episode of my podcast. I'm going to do a huge campaign to get Bobby Bones onto my show as the guest. So I go on Instagram with my phone. I'm filming a selfie video like this. I say, Bobby, it's Zach Kuhn. You don't know me, but I'm about to hit the 100th episode of my podcast. Come on the show. Make me a real podcast. Let's do it. Crickets. Nothing happened. So a week later, I go on again, and the 100th episode's approaching. Like, I only have 5 weeks to do this. So a week later, I'm back on Instagram. I go, Bobby, it's Zach Kuhn. I'm trying again. Come onto the show. Let's make it happen. Crickets. So I got to raise the stakes. So I buy his children's book that he had written. And I go, I'm going to do a live reading of your children's book, Bobby, on Instagram Live until you come into the podcast. So I have the children's book, and I'm reading it on Instagram Live. And I'm thinking, this is going to work. He's going to see this. Crickets. Nothing happens. Okay. So then I go, I need to keep raising the stakes. So I go on Cameo. I go, who's the most famous country artist I can find on Cameo? It was Carly Pierce. And I write to Carly on Cameo. And I say, Carly, I'm trying to get Bobby Bones on the podcast. Can you ask him for me to come into the podcast? So she makes this cameo that you can find on my Instagram if you dig. She goes, Bobby Bones, it's Carly Pierce. I think you should go on Zach Kuhn's show, blah, 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 the whole thing. I go, this is going to work. This is going to go viral. Crickets, nothing. So at this point, a really good mentor of mine who meant really well, she says to me, she literally says, she goes, this is so desperate. This is not a good look. It's kind of weird. She goes, I think you should stop. She goes, it's not going to happen. She meant so well. She was like, you're coming across like a little stalkerish, like I think this is not a good look. You really should stop. And I was like, okay, great. But I was like, I got to do one more thing. So finally, I take out a billboard in the middle of Nashville on the Nashville sign.
No kidding.
I put up a billboard that says, Bobby Bones, help the Zach Kuhn Show become a real podcast. I take a photo in front of it going like this, put it on Instagram, tag him. It goes viral. Thousands and thousands and thousands of likes, and everybody's tagging Bobby Bones. And he just says, okay. And to his credit, and this is the crazy thing about Bobby Bones that I admire so much, and I have to give him credit for, is 3 days, he says, okay. 3 days later, I was in his studio recording the interview and with him doing it. And he's the coolest. And he's done so many things in my life where I go, there's no way he's going to follow through on that. And then he ends up following through on it. And it's inspiring because it's like, I don't like it. The things that he says he's done for me, I almost can't even get into it because they're so personal, but he's done such amazing things for me. And I'm like, there's no way he said he was going to do that, but he's not going to do that. And then he ends up following through on it, has inspired me to follow through on everything that I say I'm going to do, which I do. But that was a crazy episode, crazy story. And we've become pretty friendly through it. And I always think about there's a meme or like a thing somewhere where you see a guy digging for gold, and they always say you never know how close you were to hitting gold when you turn around and you see the guy digging, and there's a like a thin wall here. If you dug a little further, you would have hit gold. That was almost me with the Bobby Bones interview. You never know how close you are. I could have stopped because I could have said, "Oh, I just bought a fucking cameo. We're done." And it was that last little push of the billboard that really sent it over the edge. So that's to me, that was one of the craziest things, the craziest stunts that I've ever done. So
Once again, I'm so impressed with your persistence and your creativity. You've got balls bigger than Texas. Good on you, buddy.
hopefully bigger than New York, which isn't even a saying, but I'm a New Yorker, so let's say bigger than Manhattan.
So what's next? I mean, you've conquered podcast world. You've got a great print publication in this town. You've got thousands of subscribers to your thrice weekly newsletter. Where do you go from here? What's next?
The newsletter is really, I mean, it's crazy to look at who reads the newsletter every day. I mean, it's the biggest names in the industry. I probably won't name drop them here, but it's everyone that you've ever heard of looks at this every day. And sometimes I run into them and they say really nice things about the newsletter. And it's, there's definitely, it feels like there's a pressure to keep it at a certain level, maintain it, keep growing. And that's definitely a big goal. The print issues are an exciting thing that we've done this year that the response has been insane. People were always like, why'd you do the print issues? And I was like, well, I thought I'd try it and just see. And the response from the advertisers, but also the people who want their content in the print issue has been insane. So we're doing them quarterly, like I said. Maybe we'll start doing 6 a year, do them every other month eventually. So that's a super exciting thing where I feel like print is really cool and exciting again. And people, we do these lists in print and we publish them and everyone in the lists wants them and people order them online and we ship out thousands of them. So it's, that's a super exciting thing, the print issue. And then I still go out on the road and I still play guitar whenever I can. I'm actually out later this month with a band called Shepherd, which is a massive Australia band. They had this huge song called Geronimo that everyone probably knows. And we did a run a month ago that was sold out across the Northeast. And now we're doing another run on the West Coast. So I'll be out with them for a week, which is fun because I still get to go out and play every now and then. But you should see me, we'll be in the van driving to the next gig and I'll be on my laptop with a hotspot, sending emails and writing or doing whatever it is. We'll sound check. Everyone will go to the green room. I'm still working. We'll play the show. Everyone will go out to the bar. I'm in the hotel, like still working, sending emails or whatever it is. So life on the road gets gets kind of exhausting, on a good day, but it's super nonstop for me when I'm running the company and still trying to tour because I love getting out and playing guitar whenever I can. So I still try to keep that alive. But those are the big things. And then still growing the podcast. I had Brad Paisley on the show, which was a huge bucket list thing. Yesterday, I did an incredible interview with Dan Huff in his apartment, or not his apartment, his house, in his home studio. That'll probably come out next week, maybe the following week. But we were talking about him playing on Michael Jackson records and Madonna records and producing Taylor Swift and all the things that he's done. So that's been, that's going to be an amazing episode. And we've got some we have someone coming up in 2 weeks. I don't want to jinx it because I almost feel like sometimes these things fall through or they get canceled or who knows what happens, but we probably have the biggest guest I've ever had on the show coming up in about 2 weeks. That is going to be mind blowing. So just stay tuned, check in about 2 weeks. Again, like we've had to reschedule a couple times and it's fallen through. So I don't want to say who it is, but hopefully in 2 weeks, knock on wood, we're going to have a monumental guest on the show. So that's sort of the focus of what I'm doing right now with it too.
I'm very intrigued. I can't wait to hear. I mean,
that was the point. I tried to intrigue you, Tom. That was the whole purpose.
You got me. No, I'm serious, dude. You've had some great big names: Paisley, Billy Gibbons.
That Chris Shiflett of the Foo Fighters has been on. We've had Colby Calais on. Seth Godin has come on the show twice.
Yeah, man, go. This
fun.
is so inspiring. I like I said when I introduced you, you are wise beyond your years. 28 going on 48. Well, so what's your romance life like? Who's your girlfriend?
Tom, there's no girlfriend in the picture, okay?
What?
Could she? We talked about this yesterday. I was just looking at the chat. Uh,
You are Nashville's most eligible bachelor. All the
well, please
ladies
spread the
listening to
word,
this.
Tom. Tom, spread the word. Come on. What do we have to do? Tom, really quickly, I have a couple questions for you. Okay. While we're here, first of all, you're the best networker on the planet in the music industry because it's your job to find people, which is really what networking is. Sometimes I find like I don't even know where to find someone for what I'm trying to look for. So when you get a search, now your network is so extensive and you just know who to call. But you called me because you got something that was sort of in the realm of theatrics or whatever. And is that what you do? Do you just call people and start hunting? How do you find people when you need to find someone for a job?
Well, first, let me clarify. I'm the second best networker on this webinar.
No
Um,
way, Tom. Come on.
well, you're very impressive as a networker, but your question is right. How does headhunting happen? It's playing the game. Who do you know? Who do you know? Who do you know? I do have 17 years of relationships. I always tell people I collect rock stars. I've got an extensive database that covers every lane of the music industry. So when I am retained to do a search, I already know where I'm going to begin that search. I kind of start on second base, if you will, but I don't rely solely on just the people I already know organically. I want to continue developing my database and my network beyond that. And so I called you about a search when I was looking for the head talent buyer for the Ambassador Theater Group, because I knew you knew people in the theater world. And you gave me 3 or 4 great names of people that I had not known before. Those are now in my collection. And so it just goes from there. My network is many thousands of music executives across the world and in every lane of the business.
So,
Um,
what do you think is your skill set that comes natural to you that gives you the ability to do this so efficiently?
wow, how much time do we have? The thing I love about executive search or headhunting is every search is a puzzle. In other words, how do I solve this puzzle? How do I solve this riddle? I get so energized by taking down the search and then thinking, all right, where am I going first? Who am I going to call first? Who are my first 50 calls? And where does that lead? And in every one of those conversations, I'm not only potentially vetting that person as a possible candidate for the search, but then I'm picking their brain about other people that they may lead me to. And through the course of several weeks of making those phone calls and sending those emails and having those conversations, I take a very long list of candidates and cull it down to a very short list of finalists. And it's a fascinating, very energizing exercise that keeps me, excited about what I do.
Tom, okay, last question I have for you. Because to me, I just think it's so fascinating what you do. Of all the positions in the music industry, of all the jobs, I don't know how much you can say about it, or I don't know. What position in the music industry across the board, across the companies, do you think is the most lucrative? What has the best salary attached to it? Is it A&Rs? Is it managers? Is it publicists? I don't even know if you can say.
Are you asking me for the most lucrative search I've ever done? Or are you asking me in general, where's the money?
General, across the board, is there a position in the music industry that typically has a more lucrative salary than the others?
Follow the money. Where's the
Follow
money
the
being made in the music industry? Well, a lot of what we do is in the live side of the industry. So, in other words, senior executives that work for companies like Live Nation and AEG and Golden Voice and others, those people tend to make a lot of money, as they should, because they're making a ton of money for those companies and for the artists that they are promoting. C-suite jobs in the label world pay well. Those jobs are few and far between. They're hard to come by. Publishing, big time money to be made in publishing. Consequently, senior executives in publishing tend to be highly compensated. So follow the money is the answer.
So nobody gets into this for the money, hopefully, but the live side is definitely the place to be.
It,
Maybe.
it's funny. Unlike you, I have no musical ability whatsoever. I came into this business because I'm a concert junkie. I can't write music, I can't sing, I can't play, but you'll never meet a bigger fan of the content and the creator of that content than me. And when I was 42 years old, I decided I want to go to work in the music industry. And my wife looked at me like I had three heads. And I had two kids in private school, a big mortgage, and I decided I'm going into the music industry. Can you think of a stupider thing to do at age 42 than that? Well, 17 years later, here I am, and I'm the luckiest guy you've ever met. I figured out a way to get very well paid by going to concerts.
Tom, you've got the best story ever. And it's crazy. I love hearing your story as many times as I've heard it, because I think some people might be, even I find going into other industries like, oh, I don't know anything, or I don't know anyone in that industry. It's embarrassing. You're reaching out to people and you don't know people. And you just had the confidence, or maybe you didn't have the confidence, but you faked it to just go into to the music industry, which is a hard industry to break in and say, I want to be part of this. And people took you in, or you had to fight to get in. I'm sure it was a little bit of both. But now people look at Tom Truitt and they just go, Tom Truitt's a part of the industry. So,
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. That's high praise. I feel like I've earned it, but I still have a lot to learn and a lot more work to do. We're blessed to make our living doing what we do. I tell people all the time, if you can figure out a way to do what you love, you'll never feel like you're working a day in your life. And I wish I had figured it out at 22 instead of 42. But I'm very, very blessed and very fortunate. What I'm really blessed and fortunate to do is count people like you as my friends in this industry, and many of the people that are attending this event today, and many of the other people that I've featured on this platform. I want to thank you for spending this hour with me, and would love to have you back at a future date, because you've got a lot more to tell and a lot more wisdom to share.
Tom, thank you so much for having me. This is really fun because I've watched so many of these. So to be on this side is really fun. Everyone's in the chat chatting. Do we miss any questions, or do we hit them all? I think we got most of them. But thank you all for tuning in. And somebody texted me right now. It said Nashville's most eligible bachelor. Ha 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 ha. So people are watching this and they're tuning in.
Luber, what was it?
Luber, but that's for another.
Luber is
We'll scrub
Nashville's
that from
most
the record.
eligible bachelor.
We'll scrub that from the record, Tom.
No, we won't. It's a beautiful story. Luber, you are Nashville's most eligible bachelor. Girls, get out there. He's looking for love.
Oh boy. Oh boy. Okay.
All right, listen, folks, thank you. Hey, I'll be back here next week. I will not be sitting in the host chair next week, but I am so pleased to present a couple of friends of mine from the live music industry, especially from the Fish world. Anyone that knows me knows my passion for that band. So tune in next Thursday at 1 o'clock Central, 2 o'clock East for more.
How many Fish shows have you been to? Quick, how many Fish shows have you been to?
47 or 8, maybe.
Oh my God. Are they better now than they've ever been?
What?
Are they better now than they've ever been?
Absolutely. That's the best band in the whole world right now, hands down.
Right, we'll do an episode. The next time we'll talk more about jam bands and Fish.
All right, folks, y'all take care. Be nice to each other.